Today my guest on the Songwriting for Songwriters podcast is Jim Cregan. Jim is a seasoned professional touring musician and songwriter. He's known for collaborating with Cockney Rebel, writing songs with Rod Stewart, playing with Katie Melua, Joe Cocker, Willie Nelson and Kid Rock, and many more. That solo in Cockney Rebel, Come Up and See Me, that's Jim. That solo on I Was Only Joking, Rod Stewart, that's Jim. He also wrote Tonight I'm Yours with Rod, Hot Legs and many more classics. He's an award-winning songwriter and we have a fantastic chat about his songwriting, about guitar playing, about what the muse is, creativity and much more. So please enjoy this podcast, subscribe and go and check out Jim's website. Today on my Songwriting for Songwriters podcast, my guest is Jim Cregan. Jim, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm sort of just putting up with this beautiful rainy summer weather, but other than that, I'm okay. Thanks for being a guest. Now, some of your you have created some of the most memorable and most loved moments in music, and I kind of fell in love with your guitar playing, not knowing who you were as a kid, really being driven up and down the country, listening to Rod Stewart, and some of your breaks and guitar solos are some of the kind of, it's just magical playing, and it's very kind of very original, unique, sensitive, and melodic guitar playing. So first of all, thank you for inspiring me as a guitar player and for those moments. But you're also a songwriter, which is what this songwriting podcast is all about. So my first question to you is, do you remember writing your first song, and do you remember what it was called?
I can't remember what it was called, but I remember writing it at school. I had a little band. I went to Poole Grammar School, and we had a band there called the Falcons, which was kind of a Shadows cover band, really, or it was all instrumental. We didn't really sing. That's only we had a PA. I think most of us all went through one amp.
Great.
And it might have been something called Sidetrack. I've got a feeling that might have been the name, and it was an instrumental. It was fairly horrible. But it set me on a path that I've been on ever since, which is, 60 odd years of it. So, I didn't write very prolifically during my school years. I was busy kind of trying to learn how to play the bloody thing, that took most of my time. But I've been writing ever since, and it's been very good for me because the work comes and goes in terms of touring or session work, but the songwriting royalties go on forever and 70 years after I die, which is very handy.
Yeah, sure.
My children have promised to send the money to me in heaven.
Fantastic. And do you remember, obviously you've been a guitar player and a musician in your own bands and a touring musician, but do you remember kind of making a decision to commit to being a songwriter as well as being a musician?
They just seem to naturally go hand in hand.
Sure.
I don't know why that is. I know there are some lovely musicians who don't. Well, there's a funny kind of story to that, because when I first met Kevin Savigar, who still plays with Rod Stewart and is his musical director, he was coming out of the Royal College of Music. Yeah. We auditioned him, and he was incredibly good and a very nice young man of about, 23 or something. And I said to him, well, you and I are going to be sharing a house in Los Angeles when we go back to work. He's got the job because he was such a great player and a great guy. I said, so we'll write. Well, we're there in this house. There's the grand piano in it. And we said, I don't know how to write. I said, of course you do. He said, no, I don't. I've never written anything. Yeah. And I said, well, I know you're a schooled musician, and sometimes I've known that schooled musicians don't really know how to improvise. I've bumped into that occasionally. But I said, I'll tell you what, then I'll teach you. I'll teach you how to write. And so we sat down and we wrote a song, which would just the music, not the lyric, of a verse, chorus, and bridge every day while we were in this house. And some of them were just absolute rubbish, and some of them were good. Some of them made them onto Rod Stewart records, some didn't. But it was an exercise in just a little bit of discipline
Yeah.
You know, I'm not terribly disciplined as a writer, although I can be. I don't enjoy that part of it. I like writing when I feel like it.
Okay.
But Kevin and then went on to write with me loads of songs for Rod. I mean, we now out numbers that I've got about 30, 35 Rod Stewart cuts, but Kevin must have 50 because he produced the last 2 or 3 albums very successfully and was a co-writer with Rod on all those records. So God bless him, he's done very well.
Fantastic. I mean, Rod Stewart for me was a massive influence growing up. I mean, his voice and his songwriting and his co-writes were, for me, just something he's able to access really heartfelt emotions and lyrics. So he was a huge influence on me growing up. When was he an influence on you before you met him?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I'd seen him and thought he was great, but no, I was already sort of a fully developed musician by the time Rod and I started to work together. I was about 32,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'd been in some successful bands, and I had a few covers. But of course, it was a huge step up in terms of exposure. You get a lot of exposure if you're going to play with Rod. And I did it for about on and off. I took a break at one point, but on and off for about 18 years or so. And we're still, in fact, an email from him today saying, you know, when are you coming round?
Bless.
You
Brilliant.
know.
So when you're writing then with I mean, I know you've written with your own great songs and with other people, but just for a second, just to stay on the Rod train,
Mm,
when you're writing with him, what
mm.
role do you assume, or what do you bring, and what does he bring to that co-writing relationship? Because it's such a beautiful thing, a long-term co-writing collaboration, and I'm just really interested to know how that works with you and him, and what you bring when you know to pull back. What's the kind of process and relationship there?
Well, that's a good question. It does vary, but my favorite way to write with him is sitting there in the room with the guitar,
Yeah,
and I play something and suggest I might suggest a melody. He might suggest the melody, but I'll just find something. I mean, it can be as most of the good songs I think I've written have mainly been extremely simple. You know,
okay,
it's just about the melody.
yeah,
And I think of myself just as I think of myself more as a guitar soloist than necessarily a great rhythm player like Nile Rodgers,
yeah,
who's just a killer.
yeah,
I mean, but I can take a solo without any trouble at all. It's a strange um, ability that I have, and I will try. Well, I don't even try. I just play the bloody thing, and
yeah,
somehow I my phrasing or um, my process of creating a melody. I like memorable guitar solos, even
yeah,
though I'm a big fan of Eddie Van Halen's work and Jeff Beck's work, which you would have to be from Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross to be able to sing those solos. You wouldn't be able to hum one at the bus stop, and people saying, "Oh, you're humming that solo from See Me Make Me Smile." So I I'm quite able to do that, and so I'm quite able to throw a melody onto a chord change.
yeah,
You know, I just have I you know what it is. Everybody can do it. That's the truth of it. I just don't have any fear. I lost the fear of either making a fool of myself,
yeah,
which I do on a regular basis, and I've likened songwriting, especially with a stranger, is to going into a room and getting naked.
yeah,
And it's embarrassing and it's awkward. But if you don't do it, you're not really going to come up with the good stuff because unless you are prepared to open your heart to the stranger or the friend, you you won't reach the real good stuff, which is the authenticity of the idea. And it can be so simple.
yeah,
You know, it can be "Don't worry, be happy." I mean,
mm,
what a great song that is.
yeah.
I mean, it's so simple, but just so heartfelt. And he does. I mean, that's a good example of how simplicity and honesty can make a hit.
I think you're right. I think I mean, just to go back on something you were saying about your guitar playing is extremely melodic. It's quite rare. Like you said, there's shredders and there's people that can write a solo, but your playing always feels to me like it is it is quite songwritery. It's got its own melody and journey. And you said in an interview that I read that for you, songwriting, the most important thing, you're led by melody.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
I mean,
Whenever you're in trouble,
yeah, this is
yeah,
going to
follow.
sound abstract for people that maybe don't understand songwriting, but for my as a songwriter myself, melody will come very quickly and it will be very instinctive and it will arrive. How does melody happen for you? Does it just show up? Do you let it kind of go around your head a few times? And how does it arrive for you? What's your because you've obviously got an instinct, and you said about your guitar playing that you're not afraid to just go and have that instinct, which is absolutely right. So where does it come from for you, that melody, and how do you kind of nurse it or bring it into being?
Wow. Well, first of all, I don't think. I try not to think about anything because I find that the more you think about stuff, the further away you get from the essence.
Yeah.
So I have a philosophy which I have spoken to a few people about, and that is, for goodness sake, don't disregard your first idea just because it's your first idea. Don't think this can't be any good because it came so easily and so quickly. That may be the best idea you're going to have.
Yeah.
And just because you've pondered it and come up with several other versions, it doesn't mean to say they're better. They're just different.
Yeah.
So I'm a great fan of diving straight in and attempting to nail it right away. I mean, if I'm taking a guitar solo, I'm sorry to keep referring back to this, but if I take a guitar solo, if I don't get it in 3 goes, I'm going to stop.
Correct.
Because I will no longer be playing from the heart. I'll be playing from the head, and that's not where I want it to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I can do that. I've had occasion when I've been so stuck about how to get this solo down that I've sat down and worked it out, and then learned it and played it. And I mean, they're quite successful in as much as they do the job, but they don't mean anything much to me because they're too what's the word, contrived.
Yeah.
I don't like playing like that. I love it when I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, that's actually, I have to say, that's probably the essence of any success I've had, is that I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I just play. And the same thing when I'm writing. You play me just any kind of chord, and a melody will start. I mean, you've got how many choices have you got? You can sing a note the same, you can go up, you can go down, or you can be quiet.
Yeah.
Those are your choices. All right. So I'm quite often looking for a melodic interval that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this is something I will analyze later. This will not be when I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. But I notice that intervals are very important. Like da dee da 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 da. I mean, that first interval, the octave jump, is it an octave jump? Yeah. That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
I guess
if you take, I don't know if you or Rod wrote this particular melody, but it doesn't matter because it's that on the chorus of "Tonight I'm Yours." Tonight I'm yours, so do anything that you want. I mean that climb.
That's me. That's me and Kev. Yeah,
it's fantastic. Like it's.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember as a kid thinking, Jesus Christ, and that melody alone has really impacted my writing because what it does there is it opens up a whole universe of kind of possibility for your imagination as you climb those steps. It's
Okay.
It's great.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's also the idea that you between the chorus and the. I mean, these are tricks that you look at after you've. Okay, so first of all, you have to have an open heart and an open mind in order to get to the beginning of it, the start of the essence of the idea. But then after that, I mean, I'm not adverse to tweaking and looking at it and going, you know what, I could just put another couple of syllables in there so that so there'll be more movement. Looking for movement in the melody is kind of important too.
Yeah.
So you want. I just did this. Funny enough, the song I'm mixing at the moment I wrote with some American guys, and we wrote a chorus, and the chorus was too many long notes in it. It didn't pick up, and so I rewrote the melody, and they rewrote the lyric, and suddenly we've got like but it's not like it's not. I'm just giving you the scan of the movement. Not there's no resemblance to rap at all, even though I can enjoy rap. I don't write it. Actually, that's not true. I haven't written a rap song. I can turn my hand to anything if I feel like it. I mean, I've written some opera, was sung by oh God, I can't remember his name now. But I had an Italian classical tenor sing it, and he actually did a much better job than the guy who actually sang it in the end. Russell Watts. You ever heard of Russell Watson?
Yeah.
He's a kind of one of those popular, sort of nice-looking blokes who sings a bit of a tenor. But he's actually, sorry, Russell, but it wasn't very good. The demo was better. Had a real Italian guy. We had it translated into Italian because we thought it would sound better.
Brilliant. But do those melodies come from? I mean, like, so you're right. I mean, as you said, what I like what you're saying is, firstly, be open-hearted, have an instinct, don't be kind of, don't be embarrassed, let it be, let what comes come to you. And then there is that kind of, and I know we're over-analyzing and can tweak afterwards, but a lot of people I've spoken to on this podcast, we've spoken about, where does this come from? Now, there's the study of music and playing music and subconsciously listen to music where the brain will soak in those influences. But I personally believe there's a kind of creative realm or force or something, because a lot of the stuff I write myself, it's way too, not to make myself sound clever, because I'm not, but like, it will arrive and I go, I don't really know how that came about, and it doesn't feel like the craftsman sitting down to write something. It feels like it's separate from me. It's come from somewhere else, although it's come through me. What's your relationship?
No, I'm 100% behind that thought process. I think I suppose you would call it some sort of spiritual force, because pretty well every writer you ever talk to says the idea just came to them and they've no idea where it came from, and that's the good stuff right there. I mean, I can sit down and create. Well, I guess because I've been doing it so long, I've got a lot of tricks in my bag that I can pull out, but I never want to. And that those are for later. I mean, it's a bit like the architect drawing the house or the building on a napkin in a restaurant, and then he takes that to his draftsman, and they build something finished out of that. But the essence of the ideas do, I believe, either come from, if you want to call it God, or come from any kind of spiritual force. But I do believe that there are creative. I mean, I was thinking this just the other day about how when I grew up, we didn't have a television in the house. There's no video. We listened to the radio a lot. I spent all my time learning how to play the guitar. We played cards and we read books. And the idea that I Bluetoothed, well, so that I could listen to the television, I put in some AirPods and Bluetooth the television sound to myself sitting in the living room so that the racket wouldn't disturb my daughter who was studying in the next room. And I thought, this is unbelievable that I can do this. With my wrist, I mean, I'm amazed and delighted with these things that we can do. But still, no matter what there is, the inspiration behind many of these things come, I think, from a source that is not necessarily quantifiable. So I'm a Christian by ethic,
Yeah.
I don't go to church. I have very little time for organized religion, but I do find that having a spiritual life is seems normal to me. There's so many things that can't be explained, so I find it convenient to package those into a higher power. And
Sure.
I guess that songwriting comes that way too.
Yeah.
And I don't really. You were asking me about what's it like to write with Rod. So sitting in the room with a guitar, that's the best way to do it. I have on a few occasions written things and sent them to him.
Yeah.
But the trouble with that is you by putting it down, you are committing a sound which may not be the sound that he's hearing in his head for the next bit of work. So I've listened to demos and I get really annoyed by the fact that the singer's out of tune, or that I hate what they've done. They've got some keyboard on there which is really wanky and annoying, and my focus goes to that instead of the song.
Sure.
I'm much happier if somebody sends me a song with a vocal and guitar or vocal and piano.
Yeah, well, I think a good song idea needs to work very simply, doesn't it? You know, one of the things
Absolutely.
one of the things I do religiously is if I write a new song, even if it's 90% finished and I still need to change a few words, I will go and play it to an audience pretty quickly, because I need to, not because I need their feedback, but I need it to float in the air, and I need to judge it or work on it from the position of it happening as well in a live circumstance, so I can kind of feel its shape in front of an audience. And a good song needs to work.
That's good.
You know, a good song needs to work with piano and voice, guitar and voice. You know, it's because if it doesn't, I think you're in trouble of, like you said, sort of over processing it with sounds or whatever. So, you know, like anything, the best ideas are probably simple. Like you said, the best song ideas are simple.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's not to say that a brilliant arrangement can't enhance a song. I mean, Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones together built some unbelievable stuff. I never sat back and analysed whether it would have worked as a guitar vocal. I mean, things that are riff and dance driven don't necessarily qualify for this kind of analytical thought. God, that was a complicated line, wasn't it?
But I think, I mean,
I'll have another sip of coffee. You'll get a better one than that.
Contrary to that, though, like, you know, I agree with you, because a lot of riff or dance-based stuff is reliant on the groove, which is a whole different thing altogether. But when it comes to those melodies that are Michael Jackson's melodies or whatever, or even disco melodies, the ones that have stuck around, those melodies can be sang a cappella and they are holding their own. You know, it's
oh
like,
yeah.
They've got to.
Absolutely. Yes, we are family.
Exactly.
Sister Sledge. That's a quote. Yeah, there's loads of it.
So your early songwriting influences, then, you know, who were those people that whose songs you sort of blew your mind growing up, or whilst you were learning guitar? Who were the people that blew your head with their songs?
Well, I guess for whatever reason, I was caught up in the blues boom. You know, so I would be listening to John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters, and I think a bit like how punk spoke to a certain generation, because it was very easy to play, and the more out of tune you were, the better they liked it. And the same with blues. Although as you study the blues more and more, you realise how unbearably difficult it is to get it the way those guys get it. You know, it's because it's so much about what you don't play. You know, there are certain notes that you should not use. There are certain scales you may not use, and you know, like B.B. King can do with 2 notes what it takes Jeff Beck to do 100, and that's not really putting Jeff Beck down. It's just that it's just your, you know, horses for courses. But so I was in. Like a lot of guys, I was in a blues band. I loved it. I loved trying to play that one solo, that one chorus, where you played everything just right.
Yeah,
you know, there was some masters. That Eric Clapton is quite masterful at that, and so was Peter Green. They were great players. And so I suppose I was writing stuff like that to begin with. Then Then came the Beatles, and they threw all the rules out the window.
Yeah.
And suddenly you could have these unusual chord sequences and do all sorts of things that hadn't been done before. And then I think they were a huge influence. Yeah. And then guys like James Taylor, I'm a huge James Taylor fan. Randy Newman. I haven't really thought about who my influence is. I don't know that I'm influenced by Randy Newman, but I listened to him. What's that song? He does one with Valerie Carter. Oh yeah, it's called Sailing Shoes. Look, it's only on YouTube. Look it up when this podcast's over. Sailing Shoes, Valerie Carter and Randy Newman. It is absolutely staggeringly good, and it's the Lowell George track. Lowell George and Little Feat. It's wonderful. I'm influenced by those guys again because the amount of emotion you're getting off the off the record or off the radio, wherever you're hearing it, the amount of emotion is blinding. It just transports you.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was talking about the other day, I was doing an interview on some television show and talking about this sort of stuff. And my nephew, who's 15, actually my great nephew, is starting to play the guitar and showing a lot of interest in it. And I was saying to him, listen, don't think about, trying to have a career in the music business. It's very, very difficult. You should probably just enjoy this as a hobby. But if you play the guitar every day, or you involve yourself in music that you're creating every day, whether it's covers or something you're writing yourself, you will have a friend for life in this, because of all the things in my life that have been constant, the guitar is the one. In fact, I've had situations where I've had a lover who will be actually quite jealous of the time I spend playing the guitar. I've been told, can't you put that bloody thing down and take me out to dinner? I'm just finishing a chorus. Leave me alone. Find situations like that.
It's very true, because it's, I speak to people often about that who say they want to play guitar, and I agree with you completely that the comfort and the friend and in a way, I don't know if it's like therapy or just the kind of playfulness of a child, that moment you spend with your guitar or piano, just playing and being with it, it's a deep relationship, isn't it?
It's hugely primitive. Where there is silence, you're now making harmonious sound, if you're lucky.
I also think that each guitar, like for me, I'm a songwriting guitarist. I'm not a guitarist first. I'm someone who developed his guitar style through sort of trying to write songs. So for me, the way I pick a guitar, if I'm going to buy a new guitar or if I write a song, is I hold it, and I'll know quite instinctively after playing it for a minute or so, will this guitar give me a song? Is it
okay.
Is it a song giver?
No, I understand that.
And some are and some aren't. It's kind of
that's funny. Funny you say that, but I have now. I used to collect guitars at one point, and had some absolutely wonderful guitars, but they were all sitting in a closet in my house in LA. And I remember opening the closet door and looking at them and thinking, these are not doing me any good at all. They might be beautiful to collect, but they're not. I'm not displaying them. They're just tools that I like, and they're great, and all the rest of it. I took the whole lot out and sold them and bought really good recording equipment so that I could make better demos. And that was the smartest move I think I've ever made. So I don't really have a huge. I have about 20 guitars, but only a few of them are real classics. But you're right about when I would buy a new guitar, especially when I was younger. Not so much now, I'm afraid. But when I was younger and I would get a new guitar, I would absolutely get a couple of songs out of it straight away, just because you could. I don't know why. It's a strange one, isn't it?
It is.
Why is that?
It's just that union, isn't it? And I suppose, I mean, not to overthink. Well, I'm going to overthink it because I'm a songwriter, and that's the point. But I think it's something often to do with the relationship with the wood, and this has come from a from a tree, and there's some kind of like, I don't know, there's some sort of resonance in there somewhere which you relate to, but it's you know, it's a very, very fascinating relationship, I think, the songwriter with their, or the
Yeah.
musician with their instrument.
Yeah, I have a couple of go-to guitars. One of them, and you're right about the resonance. You know, here's something you might try, which I tried. I used to use this trick years ago. Is you hold the sound hole in front of your mouth,
Yeah.
and you sing into the guitar just any kind of note you like, and move up through the scale until you find the resonant frequency of the body of the guitar, because they all have one. You know, just like tapping on a bottle, there will be a resonance to it. You find the resonance frequency, and the Martin that I ended up buying 40 years ago, which is on all the records that I ever played an acoustic guitar on. And it's not an expensive Martin, it's a D18, it's kind of entry level, but it's so old it doesn't have a truss rod. But the resonant frequency of the body of that guitar is G.
Okay.
And so when you play a G, the whole thing just comes to life.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how how harmonically it responds better than other guitars that are, you know, somewhere in between G and F sharp, right? But this is actually G.
Mm.
And this kind of sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, maybe, but
no,
I find that it was very helpful in picking out acoustic guitars.
I tell you something. When my wife bought a Yari guitar in a shop long before we met, and I was signed to her brother's record label. So I walked into his office one day, and this guitar was on a stand, and it caught my attention. And this before I met my wife, and was called over by this guitar, I suppose. And I asked him if I could have a play on it, and he respectfully said, no, it's my sister's guitar. So you know, anyway, years later, I meet my wife and get married, and she I suppose gives me this guitar. It's the guitar that I wrote most of the songs in our band. We were in a band together that we created most of the songs on that guitar. But the interesting thing I'm getting to is because I was not a great musician and couldn't work out how to I write a lot of songs with open chords, and I couldn't work out how to transpose them because they were out of my range. So what I ended up doing in a really kind of crude way was thinking, well, I'll just detune the guitar a semitone, a tone, and ended up going down to 2 tones. So it's like the E is a C. But this is a Yari parlor guitar, and it sounded sublime in that tuning because of the open harmonics, and it's been stuck in that tuning for 20 years. And and it sounds sublime. And if I put it into standard tuning, it just doesn't sound as good. And it doesn't sing in the way it sings when it's 2 tones down, which I know is completely the wrong kind of backwards thing to do as a musician, and probably hasn't been the instrument, but the instrument has actually responded to that place, and it sings so beautifully in that position. So it's interesting you said that.
Maybe the resonant frequency of that guitar is C.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. So when you come down to, but just to move back to writing words, when you because obviously when a melody comes, but there's a shape to a melody, I believe, which suggests words. But I've read in an interview you said that sometimes the kind of lyrical side of thing is a bit like doing a crossword. So I've got 2 questions for you, really. It's like, how well, the first question is, are there any kind of songwriters or writers, novelists that have influenced your lyric writing? That's the first question.
Well, as a writer, I like C.S. Lewis.
Oh, cool.
He gets really to the core of the matter. The Screwtape Letters. Did you ever read that?
No, I didn't. No.
Okay, I won't bother telling you the plot of it, but he writes so insightfully that I like his phrasing. But I'm always looking for a phrase that hasn't been used. I'm trying to avoid cliches wherever possible. But I also had so I made an album with a girl called Janice Ian, who won a Song of the Year Grammy many years ago for a song called At 17, which was a really beautiful, beautiful piece. I made an album with her. And she said something interesting. She said, if you have one great gem of a line that really resonates with the listener, you don't have to surround it with other gems. You know, just like if you go to a jeweler's, they'll have a black cloth on the countertop and they'll lay out the piece on this black cloth. So she says, think of the surrounding lyrics as being the setup for this great line rather than competing with it so that it doesn't overpower it.
Lovely.
I thought that was a great piece of advice.
Great advice.
So I do read a lot, and so this is probably the most important bit of information that I know how to impart to other people that are especially beginners.
Fabulous.
You have an antenna that is always switched on and always listening. It's like it's what have I got? It's like the Google Nest that I've got in my house to switch the lights on and off, right? Which is listening to me now. You have one of those, and it's always listening for a phrase or a sentence or an idea, and it never switches off. So you might get it off something on the television, you might overhear it in a pub, it might be something you say yourself, and as you say, as it comes out of your mouth, you go, oh, yeah, there's a title, or there's a line, and then you because we've all got iPhones, you scribble it down on your iPhone. And so you have a list of potential titles and ideas. This is so real life as it's going on around you is providing you with ideas and inspiration, and that's so important. I've got I use that I use those ideas all the time. I mean, lyric writing is slightly more difficult for me than melody writing. Melody writing I can do like falling off a bike. But lyric writing can come quickly. I remember, getting up in the middle of the night and writing most of a song just there and then. And I was so pleased because it came in one great big piece. And I wasn't even sure what it was about. In fact, I had to think about what it was about later, or try and analyze what was I talking about. And I think... So I wrote a lot of songs with Bernie Taupin. I was in a band with Bernie Taupin, as you know, as Elton John's lyricist. So we wrote this song. The way we would work is he would come into the writing room because we were making an album. Robin Lazzurier and myself and Bernie would sit in this room up his ranch in Santa Ynez, and he would come in with a sheaf of lyrics, maybe 8 or 10 finished lyrics, or to all intents and purposes finished. And he'd hand them to Robin and I, and we'd look through them, and we'd pick one at random. And one of them was called Cinderella 67. And so we wrote this pretty song. And after it was done, and we put it on the record, and I think I sang that one. And I said to Bernie, so Bernie, what's the significance of 67? He said, well, you wouldn't want to call it 84, would you? I thought, what a bizarre answer. Cinderella 84. He says it's the alliteration. Cinderella's 67.
Yeah.
And there was loads of examples like that. He said that some place like Harvard or one of the Ivy League university does a course on and the analysis of Bernie Taupin lyrics.
Wow.
He said, I haven't got a clue what it's about when I write it. he said, I've got this great job. I just write stuff down.
Yeah.
And people seem to like it. And
it's so interesting though, because the alliteration that's the answer. But just saying it, Cinderella's 67, it's like it's satisfying, isn't it? To say
yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
and it's the same with like I think when you get a master like Bernie or yourself or whoever, like it's that combination of saying something interesting and it's sounding good, but then I guess the job is, like I said earlier, there is an architecture to melody which suggests a word, and you can't shoehorn a word in if the melody's not going to kind of case it well, so it's that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that kind of balance of it sounding good, it making some kind of sense or having an emotional resonance whilst it fits the melody casing. And like you said, I mean, it's fascinating to hear you talk, because that stuff can just happen instantly without any thought, and then sometimes it takes a bit of thought, and then
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's a recipe. Yeah, sometimes it's Sudoku or
yeah,
crossword,
yeah,
and
yeah,
other times it's not. Yeah, yeah. But I like that. I'm learning from you this moment where you say that the melody suggests a lyric. I haven't really thought of it that way, but I guess it does. I mean, it absolutely has to have the right sound.
yeah,
The Gershwin brothers apparently, um, the I think they used to call it monkey mumblings, and I do it all the time when I'm working on a melody. I just sing anything at all, any sound. It doesn't have to be a word. It's just it's not a la la la. It's anything. But you'll find that the at the crucial point, it won't be an E sound. It'll be at the top of the melody. It'll be an R, an oo, or so the vowel sound will be soft or softer. You don't want to finish with E, hard E.
yeah.
Or what you want. You you can do it, but it's ill-advised.
It's so interesting because I mean, just through my own process myself, and it's not any kind of special process, but one of the things that I would do or do is like you say, the melody or the guitar music, the initial shape of the riff or chords will come. Then what I will tend to do is go for a run or a walk and just hear it in my head, and then
Oh, okay.
that melody I'll get into some kind of flow motion, or it seems to happen best when I'm in some kind of flow motion, and then
Wow.
my brain will then listen to the melody, and like you said, there'll be a vowel shape, or there'll be a set of words which will fall in, and if I get out of my own way enough whilst I'm
Huh.
thinking about it in some hypnosis meditative state, more often than not a line will come completely formed lyrically and just land in
Wow.
the melody. So it's kind of a process of literally getting out of the way and allowing the music to sort of repeat itself
Yeah.
subconsciously, whilst kind of observing it but not observing it too much.
Oh no, I listen. You've put that beautifully. That's absolutely 100% right. And getting out of your own way is the reason that we're songwriters and other people aren't. I mean, I feel that anybody can be a songwriter. They're just going to get out of their own way,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's what we do. We we allow the muse, the idea, the energy, any word you want to use, we allow it to flow through us. And that's, is it a gift or is it just a technique that somehow we found easy to do?
it's interesting because I think what I've learned, this is like my 16th or 17th episode podcast, and I've spoken to lots of different songwriters from different genres and levels of
Mhm.
success, and there are differences in approach and differences in obviously personality, but there's a lot of similarities. And
Yeah,
sometimes
100%.
somebody will say something similar which really resonates with the way you write a song yourself, like
Yeah,
what you're saying about rules. For instance, when I'm playing guitar or our band are in doing vocals or guitar, it's no more than 3 takes because you've lost it. So there's a resonance there with what you're saying about your process, which
yeah.
resonates with me. But one of the things that has become apparent is that all these different songwriters are a little bit different, not more special than anyone else, but there's a slightly different sense of perspective of how they look at the world, which is different from
Mm.
musicians I've spoken to who are way better musicians than I am, and other creatives. There is a slightly different thing going on, and it's not any more special. It's just so I think there is a kind of, I don't know, is it a gift or a choice, and the craftsmanship we've learned? I obviously like to think it's a gift because we're all egomaniacs, but there is something which marks us out to be marks it out differently,
Yeah, yeah. What, somebody said to me the other day, But I was saying, well, I don't know what I'm doing, I just make it up as I go along. And they said, yeah, and you probably have imposter syndrome, don't you? And I went, oh yeah. I'm waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and say, listen, Jim, you're really not very good. You've been getting away with it for 50 years, but you're really crap. And I laugh about it now. I don't really think that anymore, but it took me 30 years to be able to take a compliment. Somebody would say, I love that thing you played. And I go, oh yeah. My reaction, my silent reaction is, yeah, but if I was really as good as, Django Reinhardt, it would be a lot better. And I couldn't see that in my own way, I have an ability to reach people by playing the guitar. I mean, I understand I have that. It's not a matter of technique, because the only thing I do sometimes is play with my fleshy part of my thumb, which makes the guitar sound very round. But that's about the biggest trick I've got. The rest of it is don't play too much and follow the melody. And when you're stuck as a songwriter, let's say you've got a verse, and you're trying to come up with a chorus, put the instrument down for a minute and follow the melody that you've got for the verse, and then just launch into another note.
Yeah.
Just launch somewhere else. And there's also the possibility that you can write a chorus that decrescendos, so that you've got quite a ballsy a verse, but the chorus is all soft and tender, and it's the contrasts that are so useful.
Yeah.
And that can be in the arrangement, or it can be written into the song. That you would, when you perform it just on a guitar, the chorus would be very delicate. Instead of, it has to be louder and bigger and higher and stronger and all that sort of pop,
I suppose
lore.
The thing is, which is quite funny, because there is all this analysis, which is very enjoyable to talk about with another songwriter. And then the other thing to say about it, like we touched on earlier, is, and you've been doing this for a long time, and I've been doing it for a long time as well, but it's like, it's still just completely understandable. It's a mystery. It is it's like you can study it, but like it's also completely got its own rules, and it's a mystery, and it will do what it wants to do when it wants to do it, and it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I love that. I love the process. I used to not like it so much when I was younger, because I think I was afraid.
Sure.
I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to. If you think you can't do it, then you probably can't. But if you think you can, you probably can. It's pretty obvious.
I was listening to a slightly different subject last night, but I was listening to Matt Letizia talk, the Southampton footballer, talk to a footballer pundit about taking a penalty, and
oh yeah,
they were talking about the concepts of bottling it, and he, so he was talking about one of the penalty takers he was friends with said that he once went to take a penalty, and as he kind of looked at the goal, he thought the goalkeeper's too big. The goal looks too small. I'm going to bottle this. I'm not going to be able to score it. And he went, instead of handing it over to his other players, he took it and bottled it. And I think the reason I say that to you is because you've just said something about fear, and the idea of fear saying, "Oh, I can't do this," will get in the way of the instinct. And something you said,
of course,
so importantly earlier on, was having the bravery and courage to be naked in front of someone and just let the muse come through, and that is who you are as a creator, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got a funny. Well, it's not. I wouldn't really call it funny, but I've got a story about a song I wrote with Steve Harvey that was eventually recorded by Rod Stewart, which was unusual because it's the only completely outside song of mine that Rod's recorded.
Okay.
And it's quite a nice song. Steve did it as a single many years back anyway. It's called Friend for Life. And so I was living in LA at the time, and I was quite pleased with the way that the track turned out, because we did it at Mike Batt's house and he wrote the string quartet arrangement, and it's a beautiful arrangement. It's really, really good. He's a lovely arranger. Yeah. Anyway, so I take it into my my publisher, this woman at Warner's in LA, and I said, I've got this song. It'd be nice to get a cover of it here in America, because Steve Harley doesn't mean anything in America.
Mm.
And she listened to it, and she had a tear in her eye. She said, "Oh, thank you for bringing that in. It's so beautiful. I love it. I love it. And I'm going to get on the phone to Nashville now." And she forwarded the email off to Nashville, to the Nashville office. And then we chatted for a while. And then she called the guy and said, "So, did you listen to the song?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I listened to it." Yeah. He said, "It's a lovely song. So, but it hasn't got a chorus." And my heart sank. I thought, okay, so this is one of those guys. I said, it hasn't got a chorus guy. So he was on the speakerphone, and I said, "So, okay, I hear your point, but just for fun, would you please sing me the chorus of Maggie May?"
Hmm. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, and that was the end of the part of the discussion. I think he was pissed off at me, and it never came out in America other than on Rod's record.
Fabulous.
That's the kind of shit you have to put up with. You're dealing a lot of time with people who are in positions of authority in publishing and in records, and record executives who believe that because somebody's paying them a large salary, that their opinion is actually worth more than yours. And of course, there's a famous writer whose name I'm not going to think of for a minute, who's is a Hollywood screenwriter, and he said, "Nobody knows anything." He said, "We just start there, because nobody knows anything. They don't know what a hit is. They don't know what a hit film is. They don't know what a great script is. They don't know anything."
Yeah, I mean,
I find that sad but true.
It is
and based on that, I just keep going forward anyway at my own pace, doing what I feel like doing and not taking any notes of them anyway.
It's quite amazing how many times there's been fundamentally massive, inspirational, emotionally resonant bodies of work, whether it be a book, a film, or a piece of music, where that would not have been made because the process or the sort of money men or the kind of label people didn't think it was very good, and someone had to fight for that piece of art to be made.
Yeah,
and it becomes a huge thing. And had it been down to the people in charge and somebody hadn't been pushing it, it wouldn't have got made. It's time and time again you hear stories like that. So you have to, as a writer or musician, sort of fight for yourself, don't you? Sometimes.
yeah. Well, there were a couple of stories along those lines. One was Annie Lennox, who had that Grammy-winning album of the year with that song "Why" on it, and she handed it in to Clive Davis, who's the head of the label. And Clive Davis is a legendary annoyance. Right. He's a very powerful man and very vindictive and mean spirited, quite honestly. And he said to her, "Well, Annie," he said, "we'll put the record out, but it hasn't got a hope in hell. It's a brave try, but no cigar." And of course, he couldn't have been more wrong. It was the best record that year. Yeah. And the same thing happened with Tom Petty, who brought his record in when he finished it to MCA, and they said, "No, there's no hits on it, Tom. Go back in the studio and cut 4 more." And he went and cut 4 more, and of course the hits were already on it. He put the album out, and it had "Rebel Without a Clue" and "Ventura Boulevard." I can't remember all, but so some of his greatest hits were on the record that he handed in to them, and they didn't see them. But the arrogance of some A&R guy who's never written a hit in his life and was maybe a frustrated musician, but has no claim to knowing any better than the guy in the street, has the nerve to tell Tom Petty he doesn't know what he's doing. That to me is infuriating and so wrong. Yeah. And I liked it back in the old days when the record company, I was making albums when the record company never came down and said anything. Right. They waited till you finished the record, and the creative team did all the work, and gave it to the record company finished, and said, you might want to have something to say about the running order, but we'd rather you didn't. And here it is, now go and sell it. And they'd say, "Thanks, guys. This is what we do. We sell records. You give them to us, we sell them." And that, I think, stopped having that business now with us. 10 songwriters. You know, somebody sat down and worked out the hi-hat part.
Yeah.
I have no idea how, why they do that. I mean,
It's a
it's like,
hilarious
well, there are
story.
decent movies being made, or hardly any decent movies being made, because everybody thinks we all want to see Guardians of the Galaxy number 71.
Well,
And quite honestly, I don't.
it's funny because there's a story about Noel Gallagher and Ray Davies being at a kind of award ceremony, and somebody winning. They were sitting next to each other, and somebody won Song of the Year, and they invited the songwriters to the stage. And as they announced them, there was about 10 songwriters. And Noel looked to Ray and went, "How on earth are 10 people writing a song like that?" It's like, how's that happening? It's like, it's a funny one. Anyway, Jim, we're nearly at the end of our time. So let me just ask you a couple more questions. The first one being, I just have to raise this because you are responsible for one of the greatest solos of all time. Come Up and See Me, Make Me Smile by Stevens and Cockney Rebel. Just give us a little kind of insight into what happened there, because I can't not ask you.
Okay. Well, it was the track obviously was cut, and it was in pretty good shape. It was about 1 a.m. I'd had a couple of brandies, which was my drink of the day, and of the evening rather. And we were in Abbey Road, Studio 2, I think, the one with the control room upstairs. I walked down the stairs. There was a setup for an acoustic guitar. I sat down, and the first thing I played was and I played most of the solo in one go, and then I didn't get the end right. So well, of course, we're working on a 24-track analog, so I only had one other opportunity where I could record a second track, and then they would bounce them both together onto a third track. That was all, that's all we had left. And so I had a couple of goes at getting the ending right, which I did, and so that was it. And it was, it was everybody said, "Oh, that's all right, that's nice, Jim, well done, I'll do," and put my guitar away and went home. It's just exactly as we were talking about. Just get out of your own way.
But that, I mean, it is like you said, these things happen. You were tuned in, you walked up, you had you just did what you did, had the instinct. But I mean, as a piece of writing, that is one of the greatest things that ever, in my opinion, has ever happened in music. So well done, and thank you. Finally, my first final question to you is a question I ask everybody, and it will change from day to day, I appreciate. But if you could have written any song which isn't a song you've written or been involved in, if you would have had the experience of having a song in your head or figuring out whose song, someone else's song from the great line of songs, what song would you wish you could have written yourself?
Probably Imagine.
Very good answer. Why that?
I thought that was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful message.
Yeah.
And that lovely simple piano motif.
Yeah.
Really, really good. I love that song.
Yeah.
But there's as you quite rightly say, that could change. I could walk out of the music room and I could have thought of something else. But right off the top of my head, that's a beautiful piece of work.
Yeah, it is. That's one of those songs that is probably one of the only songs that will make me cry instantly.
Stay With Me Baby by Lorraine Ellison. I don't even know who wrote that song, but that's another. Check that out if you don't know that. Stay With Me Baby. Lorraine Ellison's the singer. Don't even know who the writers are. Never owned the album. But if you want somebody to tear your heart out, that will do it.
Fabulous. Jim, thank you so much for your time and for all your honesty and guidance and advice about songwriting. I'm sure all our listeners will really enjoy this. And if you are not aware of Jim's songs, you probably are but didn't know. Go to the website jimcregan.com and tune in and get to know his work. He's a fabulous musician and writer. So thank you for your time, Jim.
Right, many thanks for having me on your show, and it's been lovely talking with you. And I wish you great success with your own writing. And we'll meet out one day on the road, I hope.